Okay, so we get to wrap up our conversation about World War II today. I just want to tie up a few loose ends. So we're talking 1931 through 1945. Here are our terms. We want to talk about some post-war goals and some post-war alliances. So World War II, which is officially 1939, although the United States does not join until 1941, through 1945, was a turning point that changed the nation and the world in profound ways. Many Americans came home determined to extend the ideals of democracy and freedom at home as well as abroad. In addition, the United States emerged from the war prepared to take on the complex and vital role in world affairs that it still holds today. So essentially what that's saying is while there is a debate before the war about how involved the U.S. wants to be in world affairs, after the war, that debate is over. The United States will remain very involved and really command over world affairs for up until this day. So here are the military and civilian deaths. Just to give you an idea of which countries are most impacted, I want you to slowly scan your eyes down to the Soviet Union and look at that number and how those numbers differ significantly from the other numbers that you see there. After the war ended in August of 1945, plans for the post-war world had to be turned into realities. However, the changes that took place were often not what the Allies had envisioned at the Yalta and Potsdam conferences, two conferences that plan the end of the war and what the post-war world will look like. This is Churchill on the left, Roosevelt in the center, and Joseph Stalin on the far right. Roosevelt will not live to see the end of the war. He will die just a few months after this picture. And his vice president, Truman, as we know, comes to office. World War II also altered the map of Europe, especially in Eastern Europe. What happened to Germany between the end of World War II and 1950? And you can see that Germany is divided. You've got East Germany, you've got West Germany, and of course they will reunify. The United States also worked to maintain positive or cordial relations during their post-war occupation of Japan. Remember, the United States will move into Japan and occupy their government to help their government restructure, force, I should say, their government to restructure. Here you see a U.S. soldier giving candy to Japanese children. Americans are quick to recognize that their nation had taken on a new position in the world after World War I. The Senate had rejected the Treaty of Versailles and refused to join the League of Nations. Many Americans now viewed these decisions as mistakes that contributed to the rise of fascism and the outbreak of another war. So as World War II draws to a close, Americans are ready to embrace the idea of world organizations. So whereas before we're very anti-League of Nations, after World War I, after World War II, we are very pro-international organizations. So you see the World Bank is created in 44, the IMF is created in 45, the GATT, the GATT, is created in 1948. So these are just some examples of world organizations, specifically here, economic organizations and agreements. And of course, we also have the United Nations, which will replace the League of Nations in the hopes of fostering diplomatic paths to conflict resolution as opposed to armed conflicts. The United States, the United Kingdom, and USSR, all three hold permanent seats on the Security Council in the United Nations. A new American identity will also rise from World War II. Americans regarded the Nazis as totalitarian, racist, and warlike. During the war, U.S. leaders and the American popular culture had emphasized that the Allies were fighting a people's war for tolerance, freedom, democracy, and peace, although many Americans felt that their country had not always lived up to that ideal. They hoped that the post-war period would usher in significant changes. So how do you have people overseas fighting for liberty and freedom, and the reality of society back home not reflecting that all the time, instead reflecting things like, for example, segregation?